Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 134th episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. And today we are going to be talking about recognising the needs of carers. And as you know, this month's theme is all about recognition and recognising different groups. And to join me in doing this is Anita Powell. Anita grew up in Bedford, England, UK. She is currently a community engagement advocate based in Bedford, and her career has included working on and off in the voluntary and community sectors. She has a natural internal interest working with and around social issues and injustices, and she's worked on causes and jobs working with women, men, including young people with mental ill health, ex-offenders, long-term unemployed, people who are going through the menopause, and refugees. She's the founder of the Menopause Alliance, formed in 2019 and currently an online peer group in Facebook. But before the COVID 2020 pandemic, she organised face-to-face meetings. She's also the co-founder of Black Women in Menopause with Nina Kuipers, and you can check Nina out on episode 111, where they organise discussion Zoom sessions specifically for Black women on a range of topics to decrease the taboo around menopause. She's the co-founder of community radio station Bedford Radio, and she's also Women's Officer for the Labour Party within Bedford, and she's a speaker on menopause, community ethnic minorities, and women's issues. She was awarded the I Am Inspiring Award in 2016 by Evans, Garnier and Marie Claire magazine for her community work and community radio show. And if you want to know more about that, there is a link in the show notes. And her current community radio show, Disability Matters, Anita talks about being the mother of an autistic child. She was also a child carer of a parent with a disability, and she also identifies as being dyslexic. And when she has time, which she's going to tell us about, she tries to draw, paint, sew, make mosaics, and read. So Anita, a huge welcome to the show.
Oh, hello.
We're really delighted to have you, and I've just read out your bio and I've talked a little bit about you, but I think it'd be great for listeners to hear more about you, yourself, and your purpose in life in your words.
Myself, I'm 40, I think I'm 48. It gets to a point you sometimes get a bit blurred. I'm a 48 woman. I'm also a single mother. I've currently started a new job, actually, as a community engagement advocate for a charity. But previously to that, I was self-employed and worked on those community projects. I'm a co-founder of a community radio station, and I've also done other stuff around other community radio stations. I'm a carer for my son, who is on the autistic spectrum. I also was a carer for my father before he passed away of cancer. So I've done caring roles, and I've done all kinds of different roles, really, as a person. My purpose in life, I would say my purpose in life is to do things that make not only me happy, it makes other people happy as well. So it's not necessarily people pleasing. I think I've got a kind of puristic view of the world that it'd be great if everyone looked after each other. So I do a lot of stuff around equality and activism, and try and support people who don't have a voice in society. And I think that that's actually enriching to us all, not just for the individuals who are sometimes devalued on things which they have no control over.
Yeah, Anita, and sadly, what you've just said about giving people who don't have a voice in mainstream society, it's becoming worse, isn't it? And I feel that gulf's really growing. And what you've said is that it makes it better for you as an individual and for society as a whole. I think that's so poignant.
Definitely.
And so you've talked about having a very varied and wide career whilst caring for your family as a parent and both as a child, as an adult child or as a child. How have you managed to juggle it all, Anita?
It's not easy. And one of the things that I've had to do is I've had to learn to say the word no. Sometimes you're put in position when you're supporting people and caring for people. There are sometimes people who actually don't need support. They don't need care. They sometimes jump into your life wanting you to support them. So I've had to develop the skill set to not only say no, it's to also differentiate that there are different types of people in the world. Some people who need support and help, Some relationships you have need to be mutual relationships. So if you're helpful to them, they do need to actually be helpful back. And some relationships are ones which you keep at arm's length because they take way more than they give, but the person actually is capable of, maintain. Some people take more than they should, really. So,
yeah,
that makes sense.
It does. And within that, how have you managed to find space for yourself in all of it? Because, like you said to me earlier, when you have been a carer at any stage in your life, often then what happens is people just see you as a carer. When you're a whole person with needs and hobbies and desires and interests and intelligences. So how have you managed to kind of get past those stereotypes, if you like, or challenge other people on that, even though it shouldn't be the carer's role? I'd really love to know more about that.
I mean, for instance, when it comes to allocating time for yourself, it is hard. It's definitely hard to juggle everything. What I've had to develop a change of mindset in some things, because I'm also single parent. So when I was caring for my father, and I was also a single parent, the things that I enjoyed doing very often were around my kids or around other parents who had kids. And I created or had a lot of friendships which were similar in networking with, people who helped out with childcare. If you went on holiday, I went on holiday with some of my other single parent friends. Sometimes I needed a break. So some of my friends helped me, looked after my family and things like that. So for me, it was really important to kind of find a network of people who could support me, but also I supported them as well. So it was an equal relationship. I also developed hobbies and interests that were manageable. I found it really impossible to do things like go to the gym. So I bought gym equipment, and when the kids went to bed, I used to exercise at home. When I got around to it, exercise at home. I started to love my garden. So I created a she shed in my garden. I used to draw and art and do all kinds of art because I like art. In my garden, I used to enjoy growing things. And I also encouraged my children to participate in some of my interests and hobbies. So I like art a lot. So I used to take my kids when they were younger to art museums and all kinds of things like that in London, and day trips and things like that, which I enjoy. And they developed an interest in as well. But it's hard. It's hard to forge that time to focus on you. And you have to sometimes make changes. You can't go out socialising every weekend if you have no one to take care of the person you're caring for or your children. But you can arrange to go and visit friends who have children, and they can come and visit you, or do activities which you enjoy doing, but you might have to do them on your own.
So I think being realistic, but also recognizing what you need and finding a way that'll work for you. So I really like the way you said you love art. So you'd go with your children to see art exhibitions, and they learnt, and you had could have conversations about that. So, I mean, it's being a family, but I think it's easier said than done in the modern day, isn't it?
Definitely.
So you talked about, and I know you've won an award, you've won a Marie Claire Award for your community radio, and you've talked about how it's built your confidence. So I'd really love to know, how did you get involved in community radio, and really how you found that it built your confidence?
Community radio, even though community radio is not necessarily valued with regards to the media output that's out there, because we've got so much media out there, community radio for me was really great, because I had been taking care of my father for quite a few years before he passed away. I'd been out in the work market, and I was used to being around mums with kids or with kids. So for me, I volunteered at a community radio station, initially behind the microphone, and then I went on to do a community radio show, which I did for just over a year. And it built my confidence and also my communication skills, because first of all, you have to develop the skill of being analytical. You have to develop the skill to articulate your thoughts and feelings, and also understand that the world you live in looks different to you if you're on the other side of the coin, even though you're both looking at the same coin. So very often I would talk to people and interview people who on a topic might have total different views to me. And if you're interviewing them, you have to be able to process that it's different for them. And that's something which was quite new for me. it gave me a greater understanding of the logic of thinking in somebody else's shoes. Confidence-wise, because I'm naturally a curious person, it just developed my skill to express my curious interests or my curious... I just was allowed to be nosy, I'll be honest with you. And people responded well to be nosy. They allowed me to ask them questions because I was interviewing them. And that built my confidence. And because I was able to listen back, you're able to be analytical about how you come across. And that can also give you insight into, sometimes we forget that the world, when they look at you and when they hear you, is different than what you see and what you hear. And that's what community radio gave to me. It gave me understanding of the location that I lived in. It gave me understanding of different views. And also it gave me an understanding of how I view things because I was able to listen back to my conversation.
I love that point about being nosy, because you're right. And also people love talking about themselves. If you give them the space to do that and you make it really safe, like we do with podcasting, Anita, it just really is a great way of building relationships and scratching that curiosity itch, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, you're also a founder of Menopause Alliance, and do check out episode 111 with Nina Kuipers, because I know you also work with her about Black men menopause. So I think as well, thinking about being a carer, having your own needs, and then everyone's menopause journey is different, as we know. So some people may experience menopause with minimal impacts to their mental and physical health. But just thinking about, what do you think the challenges are in terms of mental well-being, going through the menopause, being a carer, having caring responsibilities, with the lens of Black global majority and diaspora communities as well?
I mean, because I don't provide any medical support, I'm not a medical person, I don't work in the medical field. My engagement with menopause is about discussing the taboo. It's about creating a space where women can say the word menopause and how they feel, and not feel that they'll be judged or people will feel uncomfortable. So for me, the obstacle with regards to it is just getting people to open up and understanding it's okay to talk about stuff. Because when you're talking about menopause, sorry if a man's going to listen to this.
No.
When you're talking about menopause,
don't be sorry, Anita. We need to do this, don't we?
Because you're talking not just about the fact that your hormone imbalances change, because that's what it is. You have a depletion of certain hormones when you're going through the menopause. It's the opposite of puberty, or of your
menstruation, when menstruation begins. Yeah.
It's the total opposite. So you have a depletion, and because of that hormonal depletion, it can have an amazing knock-on effect on your well-being, and also as well as your physical being. So it can have effect on your bladder. It can have effect. I mean, like I've got a problem at the moment, which I've just found out. We've got a solution. I've had the problem for ages. I've got sleep apnea. And I've never been a great sleeper, but as I've entered the menopause, it's got dramatically worse. And I was talking to someone, and what they said, possibly because when you go through the menopause, the depletion in hormones has an impact on your muscle tone, because it's harder to gain muscle and retain muscle. And it could be the area around my nose and mouth area that has something to do with breathing has become floppier, and it's made it harder for me to breathe. Now, it's not directly connected to the menopause, but the menopause has aggravated a situation that's already there. So now I have to use a oxygen machine at nighttime because my sleep apnea has dramatically got worse with menopause. So that's like one example. Somebody might not feel comfortable to talk to people about, but it affects all kinds of things. Your periods, it can affect your moods, because a lot of women go through anxiety, and there's a biological element as well as a psychological element. So the biological element is the hormonal kind of roller coaster, as we know, with teenagers, can have a dramatic effect on how your well-being is on a biological level. And sometimes taking HRT or doing different things around improving your hormone level can improve your mindset, but you have to actually do them, and you have to acknowledge the fact that you have an issue mentally with regards to anxiety or whatever. But also there's an anxiety level where people are embarrassed because they're sweating, because they've got hot flushes. And that impact is so bad that some women in certain positions leave their jobs because they feel so embarrassed sweating in the middle of an office of, say, for instance, men. And that sometimes is so detrimental, not only to women's careers, it's their confidence. And just being able to talk and understand, it's really common. And actually, to help reduce that anxiety, you have to change your mindset, but also you might have to open up conversations with people so that they understand and they don't judge you.
And then adding to that, all the things you've said, and then you've got, people very often, particularly we know that women are more likely to have caring responsibilities and the menopause. And of course, it could happen at any time in your life, as we know, with the menopause, potentially. There is an increased likelihood, of course, that perimenopause starts in the 40s and then menopause happens in the 50s, but that's not the same across the board. But then you add to that, Anita, caring responsibilities. And, you mentioned anxiety. So you've got your own anxiety, things going on in your body, and then you're looking after people and caring for people. And it can be really difficult to ask for help. So, how could people navigate that? Do you have any information to share? Because I think that's a really challenging one.
I think with regards to the problem with carers is that they spend not too much time, they spend all their time caring for others and they don't sometimes care for themselves. So it's really important. Myself and Nina, what we're trying to do is to create a space where people can have that conversation, because conversations are really important for you to understand how to care for yourself. Because as a society, we don't talk about the menopause. So you actually don't know how to care for yourself. You don't necessarily know that changing certain foods or reducing certain things with regards to your diet, exercising more, weightlifting is really good for women going through the menopause because it has an impact in relation to their bones. All the importance of sleep. We don't actually understand that that's a necessity and that's part of everyday self-care. So women who are carers need to allocate time to understand the menopause, and that will enable them to look after themselves. But it's about time. It's about giving it time and actually sitting down and separating time for you away from time with other people. And if you don't do that, then you also need someone to take care of you, because your joints and all these different things are impacted by you not taking care of yourself. So that's really important.
Yes, and you're absolutely right, because when you were talking, I was just thinking what you said is so spot on, because we can read things and we can look at things and we can think, I should do this and I should do that. But as you said, it's the conversation space that you and Nina hold that enables people to hear lots of really good, correct information and then make decisions for themselves. So it's so empowering, as opposed to do this, do that, take this supplement, do this, do that, which can just, again, make you feel like, oh gosh, I've got to add to my to-do list.
Yeah, you do. As a carer, you need to not only learn about how to care for the person you're caring for. When you're going through the menopause, you actually need to learn how to care for yourself. And the whole thing's been a learning curve for me. So I'm still, initially, when I found out that I was probably perimenopause, because I had those different problems, and when I read up about it and I spoke to other women, I realised, you know what, I'm the right age. The stuff that I'm going through is perimenopause. I initially wanted to do it through natural ways, so through diet and through exercise, but it's actually really hard. And sometimes you can't do that way. Sometimes you need to go to the doctor and you need to get the doctor to prescribe to you medication that helps with your hormonal imbalance. But you need to have that knowledge, because the doctors don't offer it. That's the reality. Most doctors, even though they talk about it more now, they're not really very upfront about the conversation around menopause and about how women should deal with menopause. So I'm in this situation now where I actually want to try the medical route because I'm struggling on the natural route. It's not helping me fully. But women need to know to explore that, be confident to actually question their doctors, because not all doctors are helpful when it comes to the menopause.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times. And then we add the culture element into it and the lack of understanding in Nina, and this will be really familiar to you, Anita, but we're talking about hair types. We're talking about what is your diaspora background in terms of your heritage and the diet you have and the food you want to eat and what's beneficial, and the really big gap in information around that as well, and how people are advised incorrectly if they're not from a white British background. And then you add in menopause to that.
Definitely. And also with regards to, because I do community work and I'm a community worker, one thing I've also noticed that there's an element of social issues with regards to the menopause. Working class women of colour are just not offered support. And just as we've seen with, say, things like COVID, we're more prone in a certain way to need support because we're more likely to experience social inequality. So we're more likely to live in housing which is maybe not the best. We're more likely to work in certain jobs and things like that, which actually can aggravate menopause. But we're less likely to be supported, we're less likely to be educated. And also as communities, we're less likely to engage in a topic because the taboos are still quite strong in certain communities.
So true. It's so true. And your point about the jobs that people do. And if we then add in the racism and racist impact, and we know stress and mental ill health are a result of racism many of the time, and then how that impacts on your body, how your body will speak the mind, all these knock-on effects. So yeah, so important to think about that, as you've said. And for people, if you're thinking about allyship, this is a really important part of allyship as well. So what do you think workplaces can do then, going back to thinking more about the caring side of things, to genuinely support staff who have caring responsibilities in workplaces?
What I think workplaces should do, the human resources part of the workplace should create a menopause policy, something in black and white which clearly outlines how the organisation manages the topic of menopause. And I think that's really important that all organisations do that rather than rely on individual managers to deal with a menopausal woman. I think a policy is really key. I think also as well, it'd be good to organise a menopause education day or a session where everyone could turn up. It's not just about the women. Everyone turns up and they have a discussion around menopause and how it can have an impact on the workplace. Yeah, so I think that'd be a really good idea. Also, it could be that if there's a notice board somewhere or somewhere, like in the bathroom, etc., put a poster up talking about the menopause. Now, you can actually get a free poster from the organisation who run a campaign called Know Your Menopause, and you can print it off the computer and then just stick it on the wall, and it gives that basic information on the menopause, and it just creates that kind of visual conversation. People see it, they might not respond to it, but it's there in the back of their mind. So that's what I would recommend workplaces do. If you do all that even if a manager is not 100% sure on how to deal with a situation where they have a woman who needs support, there's a protocol within the organisation to start from. And I think that'd be quite beneficial.
Brilliant. So that's the menopause side. And what about for people who have caring responsibilities, particularly those caring for elderly relatives? Because again, I think with children, usually people choose to have children. There tends to be more flexibility, not always, but I think it's really challenging for people who are caring for elderly relatives and dependents. What do you think workplaces could do there to genuinely support people?
Okay, so I think with regards to workplaces, they have to have compassion to the job of being a carer. It's not something which is optional. It's not something that only takes 2 hours a day. Most carers are on alert 24/7. So a compassionate employer is needed, and they have to be flexible. They have to understand that if you need to go off because there's an emergency, then they have to kind of accommodate that within the working practice and within that person's time. But compassion is the most important thing. The last thing you want to do is an employer you've had working for you for say 10 years, the last thing you want to do is to lose that knowledge because they can't care for their role and support your organization. And it could be that if you work with the employee, that they can still make a massive contribution to your organization, as well as be an effective carer. So I think compassion, understanding, and really appreciating the knowledge that that employee has can make a positive impact all round. Because for some carers, going to work is a break. They actually want to have conversations which is beyond feeding and changing or medication. And sometimes it's really hard being a carer, looking after someone who's suffering. You know, it's really emotionally hard to care for someone you love, and you can either see deterioration in their health. I know for me, watching my father, and you know, your father, your parents are so important too, as you can imagine. And your father's that kind of male masculine figure. But before he passed away, I was feeding him like a child. That emotionally is so hard. And for some carers, going to work is a break. And I think if you invest in your employees and you care about employees, then give them leeway and accommodate their needs. And I think you will retain a really good employee who'll be appreciative of the fact that you gave them that leeway or space to care as well as work for you.
And that's the thing, compassion, sadly, it's very common sense, but it's not always common practice, is it? And that whole thing that you said around, you don't just do 2 hours a day and stop. It's also constantly on your mind, absolutely going to work for a rest, being able to focus on something else. So this is crucial. And I think with long COVID, we still don't know what the longer term impacts are. There are going to be a lot of people in that situation, I think, caring for others who've had, for all sorts of reasons, but I think long COVID is going to play into that. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I mean, definitely. I had long COVID.
Gosh.
To add to my list of things, I had long COVID. I was on an inhaler for a year and a half because I had it at the very beginning because I had breathing problems. So my job as a carer, I had to care for others while I was struggling, and it's really hard work. And I do know that loads of people have left jobs because they physically can't do them anymore. And now their partners or their children, because loads of children become carers, and it's really stressful on being a child carer because I care for a son who's on the spectrum, and therefore my daughter, who's 2 years older, is also his carer. And that was really hard work. She loves her brother. She loves him to bits, and they're best friends. But she was only 2 years his senior, and she had to nurture him as if, he was a lot younger than her sometimes. And that's hard work and quite stressful on young people. So long COVID is going to have, or is having a massive effect on people, and we don't know the future of long COVID. We don't know the future of COVID, full stop. But yeah, employees need to be compassionate. It's a must.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Anita. And I'm pleased that you've recovered. That sounds really scary and horrible. So, Anita, you mentioned it a bit earlier, but you're an extremely busy person. We've talked about your caring responsibilities, the work that you do with community radio, the work that you do with Black Menopause and beyond. So as this super busy person, what are your top 3 tips for looking after your own mental health and well-being?
Talking with friends or with a partner, that to me, I think is really important, that conversation you have. And I don't know about other people, but sometimes you're so busy doing things. But I go out, say, for instance, an evening with some friends, and it's like an energy boost the next day for me. So socialising, talking, just sharing time with important people, for me, is my emotional boost. Telling people no, I think sometimes is something that people underestimate as a must, because you can take on 28 hours worth of work. There's only 24 hours in the day and you still have to sleep. So that skill set of saying no, I think, is definitely important. And allocating time for downtime and self-care. Those, I think, are the 3 important things that I have to do. Yeah, that's what I have to do with regards to maintaining my mental health. I have to allow time and ensure that I do those particular things.
Thank you, Anita. That's really, really helpful. And finally, just to say, I'll include all the links in the show notes, but if people want to know more about your work with community radio, Black Menopause and beyond, anything else you do, how should they get in contact with you? How would you like them to connect with you on social media, etc.?
The best one is my Twitter. So my Twitter handle is I am Anita Powell. It's that simple. That's the best way. I've also got in the show notes I've included the Black Menopause and Beyond, but were there any other links or websites that you... Okay, well, my community radio station I co-founded is called Bedford Radio, and the HTTP is really easy. It's bedford.radio. But actually, if you go to my social media, I've got a linked tree, which has got all my... it's got everything on there in relation to some of the things I've done and whatever. So I say go to my Twitter and then click on my linked tree, because I could be here all day.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's good. So the handle is I am Anita Powell on Twitter. Yeah. And Anita, thank you so much for that conversation, for being really, really open and honest. And I know this will be so useful to listeners, people who are carers, people who are going through their menopause journey. So just thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your energy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
And we'll see you in the next episode, everyone. Until then, take care. Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.